Diane, can you hear me?
Yeah, but you're pretty quiet.
It was pretty quiet, you said?
Yeah.
Is that better? I'm in the airport, so we might have some background noise. I didn't have an external mic. I forgot that, but
Yeah, but I think you're gonna still have to turn your volume up because I can barely hear you.
turn up my volume.
Yeah.
Okay. Is that better?
Yes. Yeah, that's good.
Okay.
So you're on your way back home?
Yeah. I actually was in Miami from Thursday through today. I brought a car down for somebody to West Palm Beach, and so I stayed a few days, as long as I'm down here.
Might as well.
I may as well. But it rained 3 of them, so that's unusual this time of year. There was 3 straight days of rain.
You weren't there for that hurricane then.
Yeah, it was a warm front that just stalled like right off the tip of Florida, and the one day we had 5.5 inches of rain.
Good God. Well, at least you missed all the snow up here.
Yeah, but there wasn't much in Rochester, and not much your way either, right?
Oh, I got a dusting is all I got, but up north in Buffalo, we got really slammed.
Yeah, I know it. We had maybe 3 or 4 inches, they told me, but not much.
Well, I'm surprised because I thought I kept hearing that Rochester was getting it too.
No, they closed the throughway, from Henrietta west, but that was mostly to divert people on 390, so they go down 390 to 86, especially the trucks.
Yeah, right. I can't imagine getting 6 feet at once.
I know it. Is the background noise too bad?
I'm not hearing any, actually.
Oh, good.
How did you find a spot to get a little privacy?
Well, I'm sitting in this kind of a nice little out of the way place. I don't know how I found that. But to me, there's a lot of background noise, but the computer must not be picking it up. That's good.
Yeah, yeah, because I'm not hearing it. Maybe others will be able to, but. Did you have a PowerPoint that you wanted to show?
No, I'm actually working just from some materials that we put together before, and I thought, I didn't know how formally you wanted this. I was just gonna, talk a little bit about something about my experiences and give it some information, and then kind of have a dialogue and talk about things other people have experienced.
That sounds good. I mean, everybody does their presentations different in this, so. That's
Okay.
fun. In fact, last month's speaker didn't show up.
Well, I was, you never know for sure whether I have all kinds of backups. I could have gotten the hotspot off my phone or my iPad just in case I couldn't get on the Wi-Fi and the terminal and different things, but everything worked out. That's unusual. Usually nothing works out.
Well, I almost couldn't get into Zoom, so it would have been unique for me too. For some reason, it decided that I wasn't really signed up for Zoom, even though I've had all these meetings going on.
Right. Well, it looks like we have a couple of folks on there.
Yeah, I always have a number of people though that look for the recording because they're not available at this time, so.
Okay.
Must be they're using the loudspeaker at the airport.
Yeah. Now you can hear it a little.
Yeah,
Hopefully,
a little bit.
Hopefully it won't be too much of a distraction.
It wasn't bad. We've got a couple of minutes still.
Okay. I don't think I'm gonna mess with the video because don't want to overload the Wi-Fi here and lose everything.
Okay. I don't have a camera, so I never use video.
Supposedly you're very rude if you don't use video on Zoom.
Then I guess I'm just rude and I can't help it. Good afternoon, everyone. We're all here for our monthly members and friends meetup. We're talking about petty crimes at farmers markets and how we can recognize what's happening and maybe some ideas on how to prevent this. We do have another minute or so before we'll get started. So if you'll just relax a minute, we'll be here shortly. Well, let's get started. So welcome everyone to our November monthly members and friends meetup. Today, we're going to be talking about petty crimes at the farmers markets and how we recognize and prevent some of these issues from happening. Our speaker today is Jim Farr, and many of you have probably seen him at our annual conference, but he is with the Rochester Public Market, and he has overseen this market for a couple of decades, I guess, Jim.
Yeah,
So
maybe more.
maybe more. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jim.
Well, welcome everyone, and thanks, Diane. And it's a pleasure to be here this day before the holiday and have a chance to talk. I don't have a PowerPoint today, so I thought what we'd do is I have some general points that I'd like to talk about a little bit, and a lot of it is common sense stuff, but it's things I think we can all help us all to hear about again. And then hopefully we can talk about some specific examples that each one of you have or have been experienced that we might be able to help others with. As Diane said, my name is Jim Farr, and I've been the director of the Rochester Public Market for actually closer to 30 years than 20 years. So I'm aging myself here, but it's been a pleasure. And for those of you who don't know a lot about the Rochester market, we're open year round, and we're actually a public market, not just strictly a farmer's market. So we do have vendors that have other items besides produce. We have, as many of you probably do, arts and crafts vendors, but we also have general merchandise and other vendors and we do a lot of events that bring in different sorts of vendors, as well as probably many of you do as well. We just starting, in fact, this Sunday is our annual holidays at the market, where we have a couple hundred vendors with all kinds of decorations, specialty foods, and gift items. So the items that are available for possible theft is more than just produce and meats and things. Not so it's different kinds of merchandise that we also have there. So as I said, I've been through, in 30 years, have probably seen all kinds of different, have seen all kinds of different situations at the market. And surprisingly, shoplifting and theft is one that we haven't had a lot of trouble with, but it does occur. I find generally that it happens more often with new vendors, and that's why, with some of the specialty sales, the even the food truck rodeos and things like that, where folks aren't as used to being in large public settings, that shoplifting or other kinds of theft are more frequent than they are at the regular market days. By the way, anytime you want to stop me. And I apologize if there's some background noise. I am at the airport waiting for a flight home from Miami. So I'm sad because I'm leaving beautiful weather, but I'm going to be happy to get home and enjoy the holiday with everyone. So couple of things just to start out. There's three things that I think are probably the best ways to deter shoplifting or theft, and they also provide a better shopping experience for your customers, and they're really simple things. The number one thing is to greet people and acknowledge people. If I go into a restaurant or sit down at a bar or go into a store and the staff doesn't acknowledge my presence, even if they're busy, at least raise their finger and say they'll be right with me, or do something to show me that they know I'm there, I might walk out. But conversely, if that happens in your stall or in your business, that you come in and you notice that no one's paying any attention to you and they're not really connecting with what you're doing, to someone that has ideas to be a thief or a shoplifter, that's probably when they walk in rather than walk out. So, being present, making sure you acknowledge people as they come in, it's good for safeguarding your product as well as being just a good business practice. The second thing I would talk about is keeping your display neat and full. And again, that's, something that if all of you who have been involved in markets, I'm sure are familiar with that, for sales purposes, a full display is always, and a neat display is always preferable and draws more customers than a display that's doesn't have a lot of product and is in disarray. So, that's it's a good business practice just from attracting customers, but it's also important because it allows you and the folks that are working with you to more easily notice if something's missing or if something's changed on the display. So, that's the second thing that I would say, just as a general thing. And then the third thing, I think, and again, from customer service perspective and from a safety perspective, is that trying to operate your stall or your business with too few staff is another way that you make yourself vulnerable. We have a number of vendors that sell clothing and items that are displayed, in hangers, and people actually walk into their stalls instead of choose things off tables. And these folks are inevitably the ones that have the most problem. And there's a couple that have been longtime vendors with us, and one says that he expects a certain amount of theft, and the amount of theft he can calculate, and it's less than it costs him to have extra people there. So he takes it as just part of the business, the cost of doing business. But, he also doesn't provide very good customer service to folks, and people get frustrated with him. So there's other good reasons for having enough staff. But, from the same point of it, if you have enough people are going to be waited on quickly. And I'm sorry if you can't, if that, let me stop for 1 minute until they stop talking about the duty-free items. Okay. So proper staffing is very important. And those three things, I think if everybody did those three things, it would be a real help to eliminating or minimizing the risk of shoplifting or other problems at your market. I'm going to go through some more things, but before I do that, is there any comments or questions to this point that you want to talk about?
Since we're a small group today, if you have anything you want to say, go ahead and unmute yourself and speak up.
Los artículos libres de impuestos comprados en el Aeropuerto Internacional de Miami se entregarán en la puerta de entrada.
Hearing nothing, I'll continue and talk about some of the things that are just things you should be looking out for, and some things that shoplifters, whether it's in a store, whether it's in a farmer's market or other things, some of the tactics they use to help make it easier for them to be able to pilfer items from your table. So, excuse me 1 minute here. I just had a technical difficulty. One of those is people that are wearing clothing that's not seasonally appropriate, and baggy and bulky clothing, so that they can easily hide stolen items. And that's, sometimes in a market, it's people do wear all kinds of things. And again, we're not talking about a kind of stereotyping people or anything, but this is just something that you should be, and your staff can be looking out for all the time. The other thing is somebody that just hangs around your table and doesn't purchase anything, and especially if they're not trying to attract your attention, and if they're just hanging around. If that does happen to you, the best thing you can do is acknowledge them. If they're not acknowledging you, acknowledge them, and ask them if there's anything you can do to help them, and that'll certainly help with that. And then someone who's watching your staff or watching you more than they're looking at the product, they're trying to see if you're distracted and if there's any opening for them to be able to take or pilfer something from your display. Sometimes you'll have people that work in groups, and we've had this at our market before, occasionally, where there's a couple where one half of the couple distracts the vendor, distracts the helpers, while the other half is putting up products in their purse or under their coat or whatever. So, watch for groups of people where one is perhaps not paying attention to what's for sale, but paying attention to what they can possibly take. And then sometimes you'll get it, and we get, because we're more of an urban market, we get sometimes folks that are nervous or street people that are looking to see what they could possibly pilfer and acting nervous. So again, the best thing you can do is acknowledge those folks and talk to them. And all these are pretty common sense, but again, if someone avoids talking to salespeople, again, that's a sign, because they don't want to be acknowledged. It's just like a drug dealer on the street. The last thing he wants, if you're not a customer, the last thing he wants to do is to draw attention to him or herself. So again, if somebody is not talking or doesn't respond when you ask if they can help them, that's another thing to look for. And then people that are constantly reaching in and out of bags, or sometimes you'll have a person in a market with a lot of bags and kind of toting a lot of different things, and they kind of pull things in and out, and it can become confusing what product they've already paid for and what product they may be trying to hide or in one of their bags. So that's some more general things to look for. One of the, prevention is probably the biggest part. And, if we follow and watch for those things in today's environment, I don't know how many of you have security at your market. We have the luxury of having security, but they're more for traffic control, but they do also walk through the stalls, and we have also both a very good video system and a radio contact with the security staff. So we can sometimes spot somebody that's looks suspicious on camera and alert security to be watching for them. Many times vendors, and as probably all you would concur, the word spreads faster through vendors, between vendors, if something isn't right or if something's going on quickly, the whole market knows. So lots of times the first one to tell us or tell our staff about anything is the vendors, and they make us aware that such and such, watch for a gentleman 6 feet tall with a long overcoat on, he's doing this or doing that. And so we can reach out to security and let them know. Sometimes if you don't, we haven't done that on the public address system. Just be cautious. We've had a report that there's shoplifters here. We've done the same thing with when people are trying to pass bad bills, and you're alerting the possible villain, but you're also probably scaring him or her off the market. So we're fortunate to have those devices at hand, but if you don't, there's the most law enforcement in your town or in your city are willing to come in and do a survey for you and tell you some other tips that they would recommend. for keeping your market safe. If you have volunteers, you can have volunteers just walk around the market with vests on, or they don't have to say security, they can say anything, you know, help. Can I help you? Information, staff, if they walk around the market and just greet people, make people feel comfortable, but also make anyone that's shouldn't, it has nefarious activities in mind. They make them where they make regular people feel comfortable and they make them feel uncomfortable. So that's another thing you can do. You know, if you, a few more of the things that you can do from a preventive standpoint are, again, keeping your display orderly and full so that it's obvious if anything is gone. Set up your display in a way that give you clear lines over all the products, and so you can see your customers and they can see what's going on at all times. Of course, anything that's small or expensive, or if you have people there with craft items and other things, they're especially new vendors like holiday vendors and things always don't know the best way to keep their products safe. And if you walk around and let them know that, you know, that's item there is expensive and it's within in easy reach, you know, remind them to keep things out of easy reach, and also remind your other vendors, and or put them in a spot where the salesperson can always pay attention to them. We talked about this before and just the general ideas, but have enough staff, have more than one salesperson, make sure there's always someone there. Because that way, if somebody distracts one person or they have a customer that they have to deal with, and someone else can be watching and not only watching, but taking care of other customers. So it's, you know, it's, again, it's good customer service as well. It's a good preventive tactic. And again, the biggest thing, and like I said in the beginning, is greet customers as they approach the booth. Always greet customers. That's one of the best ways to not have somebody feel comfortable later taking something from your display.
Jim, we have a couple of questions here.
Okay.
How do you all balance having a full attractive display while monitoring shrink? And do you have specific setups that keep your visibility clear while keeping a display that's attractive to customers?
Does anyone want to respond to that? Diane, you're a longtime vendor. What's your
Well, I always have had 2 to 3 people with me at all times, so we always were able to watch. But we also watched for the vendors next to us so that we could be aware and make them aware as well. That was something that was important to us. And I always kept my display in front of me, on a table in front of me, so people didn't walk into my stall. And that way I could easily see. So what about anybody else? Carlene, any experiences with your markets in your county?
No, I think you're right, and our vendors, watch out for each other.
Yep.
As we're small, and making sure that happens. So, and you see, I don't know, as Jim kind of was saying, we are a very small market, so you can kind of observe and I don't know, see if anybody's suspicious, or they haven't been there before and they just kind of acting suspicious, but in that way. But again, one of the things that we do get concerned about is when we have different events going on, and then it's more of a community event, and then we need a few extra people around. Just again, that's just to make sure, not just admin wise, but keeping safe too.
Yeah. Jim, another question here is, recognizing that most markets are different, how does your market alert security to potential shoplifters?
And I, at our market, we do have the luxury of having both radio and public address system communication with our folks, our security staff at the market. So that, helps us a lot with that. I like the comment though from Carlene that, the vendors like I said earlier, the vendors just watching out for each other and keeping, they're our number one line of defense because they notice things long before security does or the staff does. And they're almost always the ones that sound the alarm bell and make us aware of who or what person maybe might be suspicious that we should be following. So I think that's one of the biggest things we can do. You know, we do have the luxury of during the summer and fall, during the busiest times at the market, of having two RPD officers on, Rochester Police Department officers on site too. And we have cell phone contact numbers. One of the things they do is when they come in the office, they leave us their cell phone number. And so, you know, we do have access to them if we really need it. We rarely ever call them for shoplifting or items or shoplifting incidents. And I mean, first of all, we rarely have shoplifting incidents, at least that we know of, because a lot of times I think the vendors kind of take care of it on their own. But again, if you live in a municipality, if we had to count on, if we didn't have officers there, it's only on Saturdays. We're open Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, plus a lot of special events, but it's only on Saturdays that we actually have Rochester police officers on site. Otherwise, in today's environment, as most of you know, getting a response to a shoplifting call or a vehicle theft call, at least in our municipality, is almost, they direct you to go through 211 and just get a police incident report number. So, that kind of leads into the whole discussion on what do you do if you have a shoplifter, and should you try to detain them? And, in our market, we have at maybe twice in 30 years had something so rampant going on that we've actually had the police come and be involved and have to escort some people out of the market. It's very shoplifting, unless you have a camera system. And even though we do have to capture it, we have a fairly good system, but to really have it on each booth enough so that you can really prove anything, it's very difficult. Normally, if folks know that vendors and other folks at the market have been made aware that they're there and they're not there with good intentions, they leave on their own. Unfortunately, it turns into a really a he said, she said sort of thing, and to try to prove shoplifting is very, very difficult. And quite honestly, in today's environment, is you won't find many authorities that are anxious to prosecute or even make an appearance at the site. I don't know if anyone disagrees, or you can type something in there, or maybe have different experiences with the law enforcement folks. And I'm not criticizing them. I'm just, saying that it's a reality in the environment we live in now, that between the number of calls that they have to respond to for much more serious items, and many jurisdictions, staffing shortages, and just generally a more cautious, restrictive environment, and a more balanced approach towards enforcement, maybe, that having anyone respond unless it's very blatant or dangerous in some way is very difficult and not very likely to happen. And it frustrates, I know it frustrates vendors, and it frustrates customers and others too. We've unfortunately had some, and it's not during market times, we have businesses adjacent to our market that are open, restaurants and storefronts and other businesses that are open outside of market hours. And recently, we've had some incidents with car smash and grab items where windows have been smashed and items have been taken from cars. And that's similar to shoplifting. It's another example of something where prevention is really the key to stopping that, you know. Again, you're not, some, you know, folks get frustrated because they call and try to get a police response or a police report, and they do direct them to 211. It's still important, even for shoplifting or car break-ins or any of these minor crimes, and the officers will always tell you this, to go through 911 so they have it on record, and they can start to build a model of where there's a lot of calls for service. And then after, you know, if it becomes a perennial problem, it may spur them to come in either with some community service officers and do some training, or if it really becomes a problem, maybe depending on your municipality, they'll be able to actually devote some on-site resources to helping you with the problem. We've never had it come to that point where we actually needed that assistance to that point, but like, again, we're lucky to have folks, RPD officers on site on Saturdays. And I think just having them there and walking around. We're going to talk too about safeguarding cash and how you can keep your cash safe at a market.
Jim, before you get to that, I'd like to make a comment, or I'd like to get your opinion on something. A
Okay,
market manager that I am friends with in another state, when they find somebody or they suspect somebody of shoplifting, somebody that one of the volunteers of the market will go along and they scuff the back of the person's shoe just to make them uncomfortable, and ultimately they end up leaving. What do you think about something like that? That sounds to me kind of dangerous.
I personally, in today's environment, wouldn't do that.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay.
You know, and we live in a different society than, you know, we did 30 years ago. And you know, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, people are much more protective of their personal space. And I personally, you know, I wouldn't touch people. I wouldn't scuff their shoes. I wouldn't do anything. I think just by being present, saying hello, making them feel uncomfortable, I think that'll accomplish the same thing. And, you know, we've had several incidents over the years at our market where, you know, not scuffing the shoes, but somebody will say, if we do have an encounter with a shoplifter or someone else, it's, well, she grabbed me, or she tried to reach out and touch me, or she you know, she or he grabbed my jacket. And I think all those things are the worst thing you can do. I personally would say, don't, unless your life is threatened, don't touch somebody. Don't, you know, help, acknowledge them, tell them, you know, and don't try to handle it on your own. It's not worth it. It's, you know, a couple of carrots, a few dollars worth of something is not worth somebody making a foolish decision, because you never know who you're dealing with. And again, I think always err on the side of safety. Would you agree, Diane?
I would. I thought it was a foolish action, but they swore by it, and I just thought it sounded dangerous myself.
Yeah, and I've seen vendors chase folks and go up and grab them, and it never turns out good. It turns into a shouting match, which is bad for the market. You know, that it scares other customers. It makes other customers feel uncomfortable. It creates a scene. All those things are, you know, you just have to try to deal with it, try to get the people off the market, but do it in a way that doesn't create commotion and doesn't lead to more problems than whatever the theft was. And, you know, we do the same thing. We have folks come into the office, you know, not a lot, but occasionally, because again, we have not just farmers, and it can happen with farmers too, but wholesalers and all kinds of other vendors, resellers on our market. And you do, you know, occasionally get someone who will come back with a product that they're disappointed with, or they buy something and then they say you know, there was 2 good potatoes on top and the rest of the basket was rotten or whatever. And normally if they come into the office with that, we ask them, have they had talked to the vendor and what the vendor say and so forth and so on. I don't know how many times, you know, if it's a couple of dollars, we have petty cash, and I'll say, just give her the $2. And, you know, we tell them, if you're not happy with what their product is, why do you keep shopping there, or don't shop with that vendor anymore? So, you know, and I would apply the same thing to shoplifters and folks that are trying to pilfer. As long as your life isn't threatened, of course, if your life or you're in physical harm, you got to try and defend yourself and fight. But otherwise, don't try to detain them. Don't stuff their feet or their heels. Not a good idea. So, and a lot of this stuff is in some of the training manuals that the Federation has put out over the years too, but it's fun to go. Hopefully it's helpful for you to hear somebody talk about it and add some experiences in it too. You know, markets are places where there's lots of cash. At least our market still operates on mainly a cash basis, but you know, a couple of other things to think about, and vendors don't always safeguard them as well, is if you have a token system or a coupon system in your market, that vendors should be just as careful with those as they are with cash, because to them, they represent cash. And I find that vendors don't always use as much care with those items as they do with the actual cash. So whether it's cash, whether it's tokens, whether it's marketing coupons, I'm sorry, there's more noise in here now. Can you still hear me okay?
Yeah, you're fine.
Okay, so, you know, if you're for your cash, your tokens, your coupons, the number one thing you can do is keep your cash on your person. Use an apron that's tight and that you can keep your money in and your change in. Move big bills and take them out of your apron and put them in your pocket, or put them someplace safe. Of course, don't let customers don't do this and be pulling out wads of 20s and putting it in your pocket. And make sure your apron's deep enough so it doesn't gape open and people can't see into the apron and the money inside. Similarly, if you have a cash box, don't have it sitting on the front of the table. Make sure it's in a safe place. Many people either have it behind the counter, sometimes bolted to a crate or something else that makes it difficult to take, sometimes in a drawer under the table, so they'd have to steal the whole table to get the cash box. Somewhere where it's inaccessible and not easy for others to get to. Again, never leave the big bills in there. One suggestion that someone had, that is, if you have a cash box that's not bolted to anything, is to never close the the clasp on it. And if somebody does steal it, it might pop open and the cash will fall out. I don't know if that's a good, bad, or indifferent idea, but it's something different. It probably is true that that it would be harder for somebody to deal with. They might grab it quickly and the cash would either go on the table or the box would fly open. So I think it's could be helpful. Of course, never leave your cash box unattended. If you have cash in your vehicle or your truck or whatever, in which I know many of our vendors do, make sure that you're discreet about putting cash in there. Make sure you lock your vehicle, make sure it's out of sight somewhere. And the few times we've had cash boxes stolen over the years, it's either always been when the somebody's not paying attention and it's unattended, or many times during, especially breakdown, not so much setup, because a lot of times the cash box is still securely stored in the truck. But during breakdown, sometimes vendors are in a hurry to get onto the market. They're tired. They've been there 6, 8, 10 hours. And all they want to do is get home, and they're not paying attention. They're still doing sales while they're putting things away and not paying attention to where their cash box is. And so that's, probably the most vulnerable times for most part for robberies or theft of cash at your markets. And like we talked about before, always look out for each other. And I know our vendors do this all the time. And they've even come in the office and told me, I don't know who such and such is. They're new here. I haven't seen them before, but you should send one of the staff over just to have a talk to them about how they store their cash, how they handle their cash, that they don't think it's safe what's going on. One thing that's come up in our market and recently was restrictions related to some of the new concealed carry laws in New York State that I guess mostly are being challenged right now and aren't being enforced. But we had a couple vendors come up and we actually referred it to our law department and asked about what is the policy for the vendors to have a weapon, a gun on the market. I know for many years that many of our farmers especially do have handguns of one type or another that they bring with them to the market because the amount of cash that they deal with in a day. It's never been a problem or anybody's brandished one or even brought one out. But the general feeling is that among some of the folks that come to the market is that they know that, many of the farmers are armed. And so I think that helps protect some of them, especially from some of the younger somewhat characters that sometimes we have in the market. But our law department was working on what the policy should be. They asked me if we wanted to ban handguns, and I said not with vendors, but we have that, especially for events. We have a policy where if we have limited access where they have to come through an entry point, we ask people to put handguns in their car, lock them in their trunk during the market. I don't know if anyone else has had any experience with that, or Diane, have you heard anything from other markets related to the new gun control laws in New York and how they're handling it?
I have not heard anything on this, but after this, I'm going to do some inquiring.
Yeah, a couple of, how it came to light at our market is one of the vendors put up a sign, and it was one of the indoor, more permanent stalls, put up a sign that said, concealed handguns are carried in this space, because that was the understanding that that if you didn't have that sort of a sign up, employees in this space may carry concealed weapons, that you could be vulnerable if anything ever happened where you had to actually use a weapon against someone for whatever reason. And we never really got a good answer from our law department on that. I had mixed feelings because we didn't want to make just the presence of a sign like that maybe a deterrent to some of the theft things, but I think on a bigger picture that it's makes customers and other market patrons feel that the market's not a safe place. And I don't think that's the message that any of us should or want to send. So for my personal opinion, I would rather I'm not against vendors having, as long as they're permitted, having handguns at the market, but I'd rather they didn't advertise the fact that they had handguns at the market. I hope we haven't come to a place in our society, where we have to go back to the old west and whoever's got the biggest gun and the fastest gun is the champion. I mean, I don't think we're at that point, and that would be my opinion on it. And that's a lot of talking about something that may not be affecting markets, but for a couple of weeks it was a pretty hot topic, and it still has. We've had a lot of comments from vendors. Most of them feel that, again, like I do, that we're not against, and we understand the reasons that vendors, when they're leaving and coming to the market with a lot of money, why they, may want to have a registered handgun with them. But to advertise that and put signage up, I don't think is a good idea. So, most of the things with cash handling are pretty easy. I'm always are pretty common sense. I always worry about vendors, and many of our vendors do it and don't take the big bills out and put them aside somewhere. I know many of the vendors pull out a huge, you buy something and they pull out a wad of 20s, 10s and sort through all that to find $2 for you. And, that's never a good practice. And I personally tell people that when I see it happen and say, that's not the best way to handle your cash, but some listen, some don't listen. But I just think, anything that that calls attention to the fact that you're handling money is not good to advertise. We have the same sort of we're trying to get to a system with the vendor fees where we have a cashless system, but I know many markets don't accept cash anymore from the vendors, but we do. It's something that has cut down and dramatically on, and have, probably 70% of the patron or vendors or more that actually always pay credit card or check or some other form of money transfer. But we still have a lot of cash at sometimes, especially from daily vendors. And when we have special events, a lot of times they don't have accounts, or they pay with cash. And, it's the same thing I tell our staff in the office, and they've been there almost as long as I have. So they're, so they know that, when there's people asking you a question at the window, you don't have money all over the desk and be counting dollars and, making it visible that there's a lot of money in the office either. So I'll talk here for a couple more minutes, and that'll leave us a little bit of time for questions and other comments. We've talked about some of this, but if you can hire security guards or volunteers or anyone to walk around the market, some people, they can be looking for suspicious behavior. Some people, which they do trail people. And again, I'm not against that, following someone, but again, keep your distance and tell your volunteers to keep their distance. Don't try to personally interfere, but just make them aware that they're under observation. And that's normally all you need to make them uncomfortable. We mentioned it before, but if you have, and most police departments have a community affairs division or patrol supervisors in your district, and they most times are very eager to come in and help you with the security and creating a safe environment, and just going through and doing an audit, a security audit of your market. And a lot of times they'll see things that maybe you or I don't notice because they're a new set of eyes there at the market. So I would encourage you to talk about that. And if you can get them to just make periodic visits and walkthroughs at your market. That helps too, because just seeing the presence there for someone that's maybe there and may not always be a regular customer, it makes regular customers feel comfortable, and it probably deters others because they don't know how often police and or security may walk through there. Again, keep your farmers and vendors informed. We haven't done it in a couple of years, but Diane made me think of it with this today to do a training with our vendors and just talk to them about this sort of thing. And when our vendors get together, normally they're very, they speak up and they all add information, so that it's really very valuable. And I've learned a lot from them and other things that we can talk to folks, in the future about how they personally safeguard their dollars and safeguard their products. If you do, again, don't detain a shoplifter, but be very observant and see whatever description you can have. If you hear a name, if they have a car, if you can get a license plate, anything that you can do to help guide folks and local law enforcement to that person later could be helpful. Even though you probably won't be able to get them to respond, in real time to the market. If you do provide this information, many times if they have community affairs officers or others, they'll follow up, and maybe if it's a young person, pay a visit to their home and have a talk with them or their parents. And of course, that can always be helpful. We talked to warning farmers and vendors if there's a thief or shoplifter, if you do happen to have a public address system, or even walking around the market and talking and say, and you don't have to be very, discreet about it. Just say, be careful. We've had a report of a shoplifter, and the word will spread quickly. There's one suggestion that says put up signage that says warning, we are watching for shoplifters. Personally, again, I wouldn't recommend that message, because I think the negative message that it sends to your 99% or 99.8% of the customers that are good customers and are not shoplifters is more negative to your market by far than the small number of folks that it may deter. And in my opinion, again, it's more likely to frighten or make good customers feel uncomfortable than it is to make shoplifters feel uncomfortable. So to me, I think that's I wouldn't recommend that, but it's an idea. There is a National Association for Shoplifting Prevention, and if you look that up online, they do provide some courses. There is a fee associated with them, but they do have some good stuff, and you can learn more there. I'm just looking at my notes and see if there's anything I had. I think I would stress again too that this time of year, if you do have holiday markets, or if you have special vendors at the market, if you're still open for the holidays with gift items or craft items, many times these vendors are not accustomed to working markets, aren't as accustomed to be, the safeguards they should take. So if you can just give them a quick heads up beforehand, that would probably help. I guess that gives us about 9 minutes, and hopefully I've said some things that were interesting and helpful. But I'd love to hear from others if you had comments or questions, or we're open to it, right, Diane?
Absolutely. Dakota, I know you have markets that are in the city, so you must have crowds of people coming in. Any
Yeah.
experiences that you can share?
I heard just a lot of stuff that we've also learned and tried to kind of codify that Jim said. Definitely breakdown is one of the most susceptible points for the vendors when, or they're, if they're trying to load stuff because they don't have a vehicle immediately next to their stand. So if they need to move stuff and there's only one salesperson, they're really susceptible and they need to think it through. You can't walk away from your cash box or leave your vehicle unlocked. You have to lock it every time as you're walking between your stand and the vehicle, for example. And then the thing that did surprise me, but that we have taken to heart, is that a lot of our new vendors they're not just new to our market, they're new to business in general, and probably really new to that, to selling in a stall market environment. And you need to be pretty explicit with them to say, yeah, don't leave your cash box open and sitting right there with an arm's reach of the shopper, and don't set up your stand in such a way that if it requires you to turn your back on the shopper for an extended period of time, package or do some sort of step work. And then the other thing that we learned because of an incident, one of our newer people, and sometimes it's just the salesperson is less experienced, college student.
Mhm.
Mhm.
So you really do need to give them, and an incident that happened with us that was a surprise, that one of our negative interaction was who seemed aggressive and would go away and was like overly, very, very aggressively, just slightly demanding things. And she didn't realize she turned to the vendor next to her to ask for help. She thought that was entirely on her fault. And of course, it was really upsetting for her. And then but there were people standing on either side of you. Her experience of that, I think, was, first of all, just feeling that sense of threat of having to deal with a bad situation and not really what to do. And none of us think perfectly clear this is a very bad situation.
Yeah.
But also not knowing the rules, like not knowing the social contract. And so I to be telling people that we have very few
Okay, you're starting to fade out, so I'm not sure the last few things you said.
Oh dear. Okay. All right. Let me. Sorry if the sound isn't good. I'm not sure. I'm on a cell phone.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
You're better now.
Oh, good. Okay. Changed microphones. Yeah, just being very explicit with incoming salespeople about how they can ask for help. And to be very careful. But as I see that, like, we had a young salesperson come in who did not realize that she could just turn to her left or right and say to the vendor next to her that something bad is happening and I need help, and she thought for some reason like that was against the rules. I can't explain it, but that was what she thought. So now we know to be much more explicit with incoming people who may be very inexperienced, and in business and in selling and in standing on a street corner in New York City. So we try to give them all kinds of pointers.
Yeah, I think that's really key, making sure that everyone is aware of what they can and can't do, that everyone's there to help one another.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Anyone else have any experiences they want to share? Questions they want to ask? Well, I'll give you one of my experiences. I used to vend at the regional market in Syracuse, which is comparable to Jim's market in Rochester. And we had a regular shopper. I use the term shopper loosely, but she was well known for shoplifting. And it got to the point where we all knew her and we all pointed out to one another when we saw her come into the market, and you watched for the vendor down the line. And I caught her myself a number of times, sometimes trying to steal from me, sometimes trying to steal from my neighbor. So we just always watched out for one another. And as soon as she came in the market, it would go right down the line. Every vendor would turn to the next one and say, okay, she's here, keep an eye out. So that was very important and helped a lot of us to prevent having our product taken because we all watched for one another. ultimately she was banned from the market, but I don't know how effective that really was. Unless you have somebody guarding the entrances, I don't know how you're actually going to keep somebody out.
Yeah, I mean, you can get a no trespassing order against them, but again, nobody will enforce it, so
Right.
yeah,
No, go ahead.
no, and I was just saying, we've had similarly, the same thing with sometimes folks that are panhandling, and on Saturdays especially, we're lucky to have security there. So we've had occasions where they've walked someone out of the market, and we told them that they're banned for 6 months. We have no authority to do that. Some agree, some don't. Our law department would have a fit because they would say somebody could sue us. Well, we've never had anyone have in those cases come back and try to sue us, but it is something you have to think about.
But I think that's something that is easier to do in your market. You're the city of Rochester, you own that market.
Correct.
But when I talk to police in the Syracuse area, doing some research for this kind of thing, they told me that markets that are set up on somebody else's property, you don't have that authority, and they will not even talk about enforcing it. You have to be the property owner.
Yeah, I think you're probably correct, especially with most folks have informal agreements for the use of property, and it may be different if you were a tenant with a regular legal lease, but
Right.
I think with the informal way most markets operate, that it'd be very hard if it ever really went to court to try to enforce it.
Is there no like internal boycott though, where your vendors could choose?
Sure, they could choose not to sell to this person, and maybe that would ultimately make them decide to leave, but that's hard to get enough cooperation on that from everyone. It's hard to say no to somebody who's standing there trying to give you money.
Happily, at our market and with the number of people we have and everything, it's never been a huge problem. But there are, like Diane said, some known characters, but it's a good thing, and maybe it's because a lot of our vendors have been there a long time and are used to taking precautionary steps. But again, I think 99.9% of your customers are good people and not there to steal. So, while this is all very important, I think we don't want to go overboard either, because sometimes you have one incident that's isolated, then you go overboard, and I'm always trying to balance making everyone feel comfortable versus taking draconian measures to try to deter what's maybe an isolated or a very small problem. So you have to balance that, I think.
The one thing that we've seen in our markets this year is the rise of the tip jar, which was pretty rare before the past few months. I don't know if anybody else is seeing this, that all kinds of sales vendors are suddenly putting out tip jars. Yeah, probably just because life has gotten so much more expensive and they're supplementing their income. But those tip jars, of course, are cash just right out in front. And the first thing that happened was somebody a tip jar swiped. And so we've gone back and said, okay, no, because I also think that I think it's sending the wrong message to the customers to say you're supposed to be tipping the person who rings you up to buy carrots. It's a very strange dynamic. But even beyond that, of just, one jar of cash after another, I think kind of attracts the attention of the folks who think, oh, this is an easy way of just, stealing some money if it's that visible. And then, are you making their cash boxes more susceptible because you're drawing attention to the cash sitting in the tip jar? So we did finally come down on the side of saying absolutely no cash sitting out visible like that. But that's a pretty new phenomenon for us.
Yeah, I haven't seen that. I mean, some prepared food vendors that we have, yes, but never with the farmers or vendors. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Anyone else want to share? Or have a question you want to ask? Well, not hearing anything then, and it is 2 o'clock. I want to thank Jim for his presentation. I think it gave us all a lot to talk about, a lot to think about. And maybe this is something we can put together and go back to the vendors in our markets and give them the same kinds of tips and help everyone have a good experience at your markets. So thank you, Jim. And everyone, I hope you have a good holidays. We will be taking December off from our monthly meetups. It's actually just too close to Christmas and so we'll be taking a bye. We'll be back in January where we're going to be talking about some strategies when you're getting negative publicity at your market. So keep that on your calendar. That's the fourth Tuesday of the month. And we'll look forward to seeing you all back then.
Thanks, Diane, and everybody have a great holiday.
Thanks, Jim. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.